One of the points of contention we had when we were putting together this list was, does no access control count as insecure design, or does it count as a broken system?
Hello, the OWASP Top 10 list is a regularly updated list that ranks the most critical security risks to web applications. And here's our predictions on what the top 5 on this list will be. And to help me out, I brought the CEO of Authentication, Jake.
Yeah, the OWASP list is kind of the first stop where people are looking for how to figure out what the most important threats when they're writing applications and they're developing software are. So it's kind of like a independent think tank where we talk about, what are these vulnerabilities that we all need to be aware of.
Starting off with number 5, we think number 5 will be software and data integrity failures. Now, this was number 8 on the previous list, and it was on the list for the first time.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of new classes of errors that will show up under this category. One of them specifically would be model poisoning, right? Like we're writing apps that include LLM models, and keeping those things sort of honest and aligned is a quite difficult challenge. And then a lot of the existing software supply chain things that fall into this category will continue to be issues, right? Like CI/CD pipelines that are misconfigured or aren't checking signatures. We're seeing new startups, new companies pop up all the time that are addressing this software supply chain and these data integrity failures as well. So this will continue to be important on the next list for sure.
Yep, absolutely. Going on to number 4 in the list, we think will be vulnerable and outdated components. Now, this was number 6 in the 2021 list, and it was number 9 in both 2017 and 2013. Jake and I have a bit of a point of contention here.
First of all, this is obviously a very important issue. One of the most successful startups that we've seen in the past couple of years, ChainGuard, is just around to fix this issue, right? To make sure that things are being kept up to date. But I think that the introduction of coding agents actually makes this worse. As you all know, coding agents have a cutoff time where their training data stops, right? And what I've seen in my own personal experience using coding agents is often they'll pick outdated frameworks or outdated libraries because that's the last one they knew about. I was working on a project recently where it picked an old version of React and it picked an old version of our own SpiceDB integration library.
Fair enough, Jake, but here's what I think about it. I think the models are going to get slightly better at picking the right frameworks, which is why I think something like security misconfigurations, which was number 5 on the previous list, will actually jump up to number 4 in this time's list. And I have a feeling things like cloud native apps, APIs, and AI-powered services increase the likelihood of having API misconfigurations, especially across stacks. And that's why I think it'll jump to number 4 on the list.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like we're just sitting on our hands and letting things be outdated and vulnerable, right? So you very well may be right.
All right, so number 4 was a bit of a contentious pick, but in number 3, we actually are in full agreement, and we think at number 3 in the OWASP list is insecure design. Now, this was a new category in 2021, and it was at number 4. But with the rise of generative AI and LLMs, this is bound to go up in that list.
So we've seen examples of apps that look totally reasonable. There's like a login page, and you type in a username and you type in a password. And then it turns out that in order to get the app shipped, the LLM actually put all of the password checking on the JavaScript front end, and the back end was completely wide open. No seasoned software engineer would design their system that way. Like if you check it on the front end, that's client code. No client code can be trusted. I think we'll see a new class of LLMs that are running things like the OWASP scanners and trying to help themselves improve their design. But I do think that this one will still be very high up on the list, number 3, if not higher.
I feel like with this, we need to talk about one specific thing, which is the rise of MCP and Model Context Protocol. Reading the specs for the MCP, I do feel there's a lot that still can be done, especially around the authorization space. So do you think that would play into effect in something like insecure design?
Yeah, there have been a number of notable MCP vulnerabilities recently. One of the more common patterns is that if you run the MCP locally, the plugin just assumes that it should be able to access and share everything that you can access locally. And that leads to a specific vulnerability, which is that you're not mapping the data back to who's creating the prompt in some cases, right? So people will run one of these MCP plugins and it'll just share the entire world, assuming that the only user is the user who should have access to things. One of the points of contention we had when we were putting together this list was, does no access control count as insecure design? Or does it count as a broken system, right? Is it broken access control, or was it just designed poorly to begin with?
How are we doing so far? If you agree or disagree with something, let us know in the comments. But we'll keep marching on with our predictions in the OWASP top 10 list with number 2. And in number 2, we think will be injection. Now, injection is an old favorite on the list. It was number 3 in 2021, and it was number 1 in 2010, 13, and 17.
Yeah, injection is a fun one because injection can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. You have your traditional injection attacks, web forms, SQL injection, things like that. But now we have this whole new class of injection that we never had before. So we have prompt injection, of course. And with all of the software that's getting built and integrated with LLMs, things like Notion, Slack, Google Workspace, like all of these things just come with LLM out of the box by default nowadays. So injection is really interesting because OWASP could take a stance that we've already got an LLM and Gen AI top 10 list, and injection is number 1 on that list. And so the question is, do they roll all of those injection failures into the injection category for standard software that has been integrated to include LLM? If they take all those prompt injections and they assign them to this category, I think injection is at number 2 or potentially even moves up to number 1. If they don't, if they take the stance that we've got 2 lists, let's let the LLM list be its own thing, I think number 2 is right where it stays.
In the data we crunched, injection actually had the most number of CVEs. You have CVEs mapped to CWEs, which are common weakness enumerations, which are IDs, and those are then mapped to categories in the OWASP list, and injection was number 1 there. But how OWASP chooses the list is not just purely statistical. They actually look at a whole bunch of other metrics like incidence rate and so on, which is why we think that injection will be number 2. And before we reveal number 1 in the list, here are a couple of other categories that might be of interest. So one, we think that there's a new category that will be in the top 10 list, which is API security. I think APIs are foundational to generative AI apps, and that's why you'll have API security in the top 10 list.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things too. Like MCP is the new API layer, right? Nobody's publishing their APIs anymore. They're just publishing their MCPs. And so if they include every MCP that's poorly implemented or doesn't have the right level of authorization in order to prevent some of these exploits, like, yeah, of course, this will be on the list for sure.
Okay, and here's a category that we actually think will drop out of the top 10. And this is a trend that we have been seeing over the past couple of lists. Jake, this is a space that you're very familiar with, so I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, so we think that identification and authentication failures will fall out of the list. This one's very near and dear to my heart. In a past life, I built a product called Quay. And in Quay, we did what everybody did back at that time. We just put our own user table in our database and hashed the passwords. Thankfully, that was never exploited, but somewhere between then and now, the idea that you shouldn't build your own authentication took hold. People finally believe it, and people aren't doing that anymore. And they're really closing down a lot of the historical exploits we've seen in this space. So I think, it's been slowly dropping down on the list, and I think this year is the year that it drops out altogether.
Yeah, just to give you data from past lists in 2010, 13, and 17, it was in the top 3. And then as an industry, we implemented standards and used third-party software. And in the 2021 list, it actually dropped down to number 7. So that trend is going downwards, and we think it'll drop out of the top 10. All right, time for the big reveal. Drum roll, please. Here's what we think will be number 1 in the OWASP list.
Broken access control, of course. Number 1 last time. A lot of the things that we've talked about today could actually flow into broken access control, right? If we decide that no access control is equivalent to broken access control, it's just supporting evidence for that. And I think what we're trying to do at AuthZed is convince everybody the same way you shouldn't write your own authentication, you shouldn't write your own authorization. And I think the industry is right on the verge of adopting those principles. So I think this might be the last time it's number 1 when we're successful and we're helping everybody fix their access control and to write more secure apps. But as of now, I think it's got to be broken access control.
Yeah, and we've seen so many data breaches in the recent past. Thanks to broken access control or no access control, companies have had their internal or customer data breached. And how do you think AI also affects the placement of broken access control on this list?
Yeah, one of the big things that we're seeing is everybody wants to do RAG and build these RAG pipelines. And the vector databases that they're stashing all of their data in just doesn't have the rich authorization controls that they need in order to keep all of the data that they're exposing secure. So I think that that's an entirely new class of exploit, vulnerability, that will show up in more and more apps and will help bolster this and keep it at the number 1 position as well.
There you have it. While AI is unlikely to introduce entirely new OWASP top 10 categories for now, it does reshape the nature and placement of existing risks. What do you think will top the latest OWASP list? Let us know in the comments what you agree and disagree with, and see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.